Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Okay, so I guess we can get started. Are we going to do roll call?
Yeah, I'll just do it very quickly. And if folks can just unmute themselves just during that. So we'll start with Diane, Cece,
Here.
Kenneth Diorenzo,
Yep, Ken Diorenzo's here.
Kia Gibbs,
Here.
Scott Goodwin,
Right here.
okay, Brenda Penn Williams,
Here.
thank you, Jody Proct, okay, and Susan Renson. Susan, I see you. Okay. I see your raised your hand. Okay. So that's here. So we have 6 of the 7 members. Oh, and we also have these are the ex officio members, Stuart Wells.
I'm here.
And Brian Smith. Nope. Okay. We have a quorum. So I will then pass the baton to Sam and his team to get going, and just I believe the next item would be to sort of do introductions.
And Sam, before you do that, I just want to thank everybody for agreeing to be on this committee. Although it may not be a long-term thing, but it's very important to our democracy and just how we vote and how the city is divided into those sections. And so I just appreciate every one of you for agreeing to do this. I think we have a great consultant with us, that they've done this all over the country. And so hopefully this will be a smooth transition, along with the folks from our voter registrar's office. We have the Democratic registrar, Mr. Wells, and the Republican registrar, Mr. Bryan, who is not with us, but is part of this process as well. And so Tom Livingston is here representing the mayor's office, but we'll be quiet and kind of just watching. And Ms. Nora Najelski-Eichner, who is the majority leader, is here with us. And I see 2 folks on, Melissa Murray and Nicole Eady, so welcome. And look forward to what the outcome is for the city through this process. So thank you. And I'll turn it over to Sam and Pretty.
Okay, so the way we thought about doing this is we'll do a PowerPoint presentation, and we can go over some of the data that we are looking at so that everyone is on the same page, and then we can open up for discussions. So I will have Preeti do the PowerPoint.
Can I get the ability to share my screen, please?
You should be able to. Yeah. Now, I just made you co-host. Can you see? Pretty, can you see the option? There we go. Okay. I think we've lost your audio.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now we.
All right. Okay, and I believe you can see my screen. All right. Good evening to all of you. And here we have prepared a PowerPoint presentation, like Sam said, and we are going to show you the data, show you your current districts, and then how we can take them to the next step. So here we go. And these are the project requirements, which is to evaluate the Common Council district boundaries to ensure that they meet the requirements of law as stated in city ordinance, and if necessary, based solely upon these requirements to assist the city in developing new boundaries. So what I have is down here is an excerpt from the ordinance 926. And as you can see, it's all described here, but I'm going to take you to the next page where we have put it in a more readable format. So the redistricting requirements as per the Voting Rights Act and the city ordinance is that all districts will be drawn such that they are equal in population, as equal as possible. So ideally, we use this term called the maximum deviation, which is the difference between the most populated and the least populated district, and that should be under 10%. The district should be compact and contiguous, and typically we use census blocks to build districts. And the reason being that the Census Bureau develops these totals, these tabulations based on census blocks. So the third requirement is fair representation of minorities. So as per the Voting Rights Act, minority vote should not be diluted. Minority populations will be fairly represented, such that minorities will not be packed into a district or cracked into more than one district to dilute the minority voting power. Then communities of interest. Communities of interest will be identified, and all attempts will be made to keep them in one district as long as the population and other criteria are met. Attempts will be made to avoid splitting neighborhoods wherever possible without violating other requirements. And the district should be in compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act as well as the CTVRA. So with that, I'm just going to go over the population of the city of Norwalk as per Census 2020. Just want to state that there is about a 6.5% increase from Census 2010. And here the bar chart shows you that the non-Hispanic white population is 48.6%. Then we have the Hispanic population, which is 30.30%, and then non-Hispanic Black population and Asian population, and then we have a mixture of two or more races. So this box over here shows you the total population, which is 91,184 as published by the Bureau of Census. Now, the voting age population, we have a breakdown of that by race, and we have the totals and we have the percentages. So you can see that we have a majority of non-Hispanic white population, followed by Hispanic population. Moving on to the next slide, what we will do now is look at your current districts based on the Census 2020 population. So current districts with 2020 census population. So these are your current districts in black outline. And what we did was we used the census blocks, the Census 2020 blocks. And as you can see that they do not perfectly align with them, but they are pretty close. And we are going to use the Census 2020 blocks. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing your 5 districts, A, B, C, D, and E. The pie chart in there shows the breakdown by population, racial, and ethnic categories. And here on the right-hand side, you're seeing a map which shows that your District B has a majority of Hispanic population, while the other districts, A, D, C, E, they have a non-Hispanic white majority. Then we start to look at the population in each district. So yeah, there are 5 districts, and ideally, the target population in each district is the average, which is 18,237. So that should be the target number that we are looking for each district. Now, on the report on the right, you can see that this is the population count, this is the ideal population or the optimum. Then you're seeing the deviation from the optimum, and then you're seeing the deviation percentage. So with this, what this is telling you that there is the total population is 91,184, and the maximum deviation is 18.86%, which means that you can see from this deviation percentages that all the districts do not have as equal population as possible. And you can see, and I'll take you to the next slide where we will talk more about what these maximum deviation, what does it mean? So in the next slide, I'm showing you your current districts, and it's telling us the District A has the most population. So what that means is, as we begin to balance the districts, we would have to take areas from District A, and since District C has the least population, that would be the best way to begin. So from A, we would take areas and assign them to C. And of course, you can see that B and E also have less population as compared to ideal, and D has more than the ideal. So when we say that we are trying to balance the population in each district, we want to make sure that each district is as close to the ideal or the target population as possible. Now, maximum deviation is a statistic which is used in redistricting, and it is nothing else but the difference between the most populated and the least populated district. So you can see that the difference in population between A and C, that is the one that is giving us the maximum deviation, which is 18.86%. So looking at the redistricting criteria that I explained on the first or second slide, it says that the district should have equal population. So the current district boundaries are not meeting that criteria because it's over 10%. And that is like a statistic which is normally used, and 10%, so it should be under 10%. And sometimes, the cities want to go with even lower, which is better. So the current district boundaries are not aligned with census blocks. So these are our findings after we looked at your current districts. So based on that, now that we know that your District A is the most populated and C is the least populated, what we did was we tried to brainstorm, and what we have is we are going to present you 2 options. And those options are just suggestions. And basically, we are going to look at areas and see how we can reduce the population in District A and assign it to C, B, or E, because they are the ones which have less. So having said that, I just want to show you an option that we came up with. And in option 1, what we did was we made some changes in district A and C and districts A and E. Some small changes. And with these changes, you can see how we have been able to come closer to the ideal population. The deviations have been reduced, and the maximum deviation is 2.91%. And we have not totally changed the structure of your current districts. And you can see that districts E, district D and B, we actually haven't made any changes. So let's take a look at these changes in more detail. And once again, these are our suggestions. And then, of course, we would like to hear from you. So in option 1, if we try to look at the details of the changes, so we took this area from District A and we assigned it to District C. So this particular area currently has 1,231 people living in it. And this is East Avenue up to Lockwood Lane. So we took this area with these many people and we assigned them to District C. And then we came in here and we took a little piece from here, 503 people west of these streets, Boyview, Chester, Sachem, and north of Willow Street, we assigned it to District E. And with having made these changes, we were able to bring the maximum deviation down to 2.91%. Another thing that we were able to achieve was that District B is still a Hispanic majority district, and District A now has 38.05% Hispanic, which is a plurality Hispanic district. So let's look at it in more detail. So you can see that the area that we took, it's State Highway 53, or basically Eastern Avenue, I think, up to Lockwood Lane. So this has 1,000 plus people, and this has about 500 people. And you can see that this area is a part of East Norwalk neighborhood, and this is a part of Spring Hill Hospital area. So with these two changes, we were able to bring the districts and make them in compliance with the VRA and the CTVR. So then that was one option, and we can discuss that. But we also created another option, and you can see in this option, we just took this area and we did not make any change to D, E, or B, and we were able to bring the maximum deviation down to 4.78%. And you can see that here we have been able to balance it. And perhaps, if we wanted to lower it further, we could look at assigning some more areas to District B, E. But these are two options that we wanted to bring to you. And now let's take a look at more details. So in option 2, we just went down this, and once again, it's this main thoroughfare. We came down all the way till here, Turnpike, and this has about, and once again, this is East Avenue, and it has about 1,881 people, and we assigned them to District C, and this got our maximum deviation down to 4.78%. And this also gave us District A as a plurality Hispanic district, pretty close to what we got in option 1. So 38%, and the non-Hispanic white population here is about 35%. And District B still remains a majority Hispanic district. So these are the two options that we wanted to present to you. And both these options would comply with the requirements of equal population, and our districts are contiguous. And I can go back to, so population equality, compactness, contiguous. We have taken a look at minorities, and we have also looked at neighborhoods. And so these are the two options that we wanted to bring to your attention. And now I want to turn it over to you for questions and comments.
I want to know, why do you have N?
I think you
Brenda,
muted yourself,
you're
Brenda.
muted. Brenda, you're muted. Oh, so Brenda, let's go to Miss C. Okay, Brenda.
Okay, so I'm not understanding why you have NH white, NH black, non-Hispanic black, non-Hispanic white. Why doesn't it have to be NH instead of just saying white, just saying black?
Okay. That's a very good question. The way the Bureau of Census, see, when we fill in our census surveys, what happens is that we can say we are Hispanic as well as we are white. So what we do is, then there are several categories in the data that we use for redistricting, which is the public law 91, 97. 17. So the public law data set, and they give various categories. So they give us white, they give us black, they give us Hispanic. But in those categories, what happens is that the people would be double counted. So we separate the Hispanic and we separate the non-Hispanic white, and we have these non-Hispanic categories so that we do not double count the people. And that is something that we use across the board in redistricting.
Diane had raised her hand.
Hi, everybody. Yep, I have actually a bunch of questions. So when you're looking to comply with the regulations for minority representation, though, you're defining minority simply as race, the ones that you've just defined, and not to do anything with age or any other factor, correct?
That's correct.
Strictly, okay. And the when you did option 1, and I should also say thank you, Preeti, because I represent part of District C, the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association, and I think what you may have been looking at is kind of a jerry-rigged map that identifies our association as going north of the highway. It does not go north of the highway. It was kind of manipulated that way under one of the zoning studies to align with a completely separate project. So the city still refers to our neighborhood association sometimes as going north of the highway. It does not. And it actually crosses into, then when you go north of the highway, there are two distinct neighborhood associations. One is the City Hall neighborhood area. So that whole Buckingham, Lockwood area that you showed in the first option. And then as you get beyond that and you go all the way to Park Hill, then you hit the Norwalk Green Association. It's a little bit of a no man's land, more east to that. But if one of the goals is to align close to the neighborhood associations, then I would not factor that in. I also wanted to ask, you're taking into account, I know you must be familiar with this. We have kind of a unique situation in Norwalk in that we have taxing districts. And so when you went to align and East Norwalk proper, mostly what we call 06855, that not only constitutes the neighborhood association, it's also the boundaries, with the exception of one street, I think, is the boundaries for the taxing district. And so I don't know, then how any of this impacts the taxing district. And I also had a question on, I'll just rattle these off because I see Sam taking notes too. How does any of this also impact representation? And nothing changes on the council, I understand, because it would still be the 5 districts, you're just balancing it out. Does anything change with state representation when you're looking at redefining these areas? Or because that whole I think exercise was recently done as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
State representation has not changed at all. It's got nothing to do
thank you,
with state
Stuart.
representation.
Hi, thanks, Stuart.
Completely different maps.
Gotcha.
But the taxing districts are the problem with trying to make this work, because if you start creating tiny little voting districts, we don't have currently the equipment to service that effectively. I'm not saying there aren't workarounds or something that could be done, but it becomes very inefficient and difficult to deal with districts of tiny numbers of people. I'd have to see the maps up in detail to tell you what that would do to the taxing districts per se.
Yeah.
If we didn't have the taxing district problem, this would be easy, of course. You'd still have to decide how to do it, but
And exactly,
administratively it would be easy.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the other thing is, another question I would have then is does this then change from the municipal point of view, then does this actually change the polling places? So you're relooking at the map then for polling sites, or not?
Well, I just saw the map in the first second ago, like you did.
Yeah, okay.
I could analyze that, but I have to have it in greater detail. And while we're on that, do we have the information in the census block stuff broken down block by block as to which districts they're in and the numbers? If I was going to make a counter proposal, I'd need to work from the same data.
Yeah, that is what we have. We went block by block and we put in, and like I said, that the current boundaries do not completely work with the blocks. So what we did was we did a best fit, and that is what you saw as the districts.
Well, I understand, and I know the map pretty well, and there's all sorts of places that won't follow the census blocks because it follows taxing district lines. They predate the streets. So a lot of them are in there strangely because there were no streets at the time, and then it's done that way. Now, to the extent that we have to run taxing district precincts that are based on taxing districts, then if you draw a line through, we have 2 districts where we had 1 before. We don't like that either, but that's the effect of it under state law. And I could analyze that, but I have to have the actual maps where I could compare them to the current maps. And I have some data on the census blocks in each, but again, the taxing districts line forced them to cut through. There's one particular lot that's in 3 different districts. I mean, it's bizarre. So,
I think too, I agree with Stuart that it would have been helpful, and I hope we have this before the next meeting, to have both the PowerPoint and also something that we can, I don't know if you have interactive maps that we can kind of hone in on. Or if you're going to do any, I know you're going to get to next steps, but I hope this, this first pass is not the end of what we're seeing, because I really would like to digest a little bit more. I see where you're going and I understand the option A and B, but I really want to kind of be able to look at that offline, kind of quietly and really think about it. So that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And I had another question too that maybe others do, and then I'll come back then afterwards. But can you tell me how do you have some sort of a factor that you use for non-responsive census, or do you get that from the Census Bureau that you factor in a %? Because I think there are pockets in our community that would be non-compliant for less, for lack of a better term. So when you're looking at the population, for example, in East Norwalk and suggesting that number, East Norwalk south of the highway, again, okay, East Norwalk proper. I would say that number could be significantly lower than what our population is. And so you may never know the real number, but do you factor in anything that accounts for that?
What happens here is that we go by the census numbers, because the question that you have is each jurisdiction has the same question. But what the Bureau of Census provides, and that is why it's so important for, individuals to go out and fill their census form. But we do not use any factors, because that is something that would become, that is something that we don't use, primarily because we don't want to bring into, the decision-making process something that we came up with. So it's numbers as they're published. And if you think, it's less in some, then we just accommodate it by just assigning it less or more. Once we work with you to say, how do we do those districts?
So I have a similar question. I guess it's related, which is that as the city has been making zoning changes over the last few years that are driving density in certain neighborhoods, South Norwalk, East Norwalk, what have you. And so, hypothetically speaking, in the next couple of years, we could have another 1,000 to 2,000 people living here in what Diane was referring to as East Norwalk proper. But just wondering, when is the next time that we do this, or should we be factoring in that projected future growth? Because I know that the city has projections against what they expect to happen based on the zoning changes that have been made. So.
Yeah, that is a very good question. And once again, like I said, it comes up in every jurisdiction because things are always evolving, right?
Sure.
But this is a snapshot of the data that we use, which is published and which is, produced by the government, and the Voting Rights Act endorses it. So we just use that.
I don't question the validity of it or the methodology, just wondering, it's based on 2020 data. It's 2024 and we expect more changes by 2026. So just thinking, when is the next time that we do this? How often do we get another bite at the apple?
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years should be in the 2021 or 2023. You would probably do it after the state, which comes out after the census. That's what they do. So
Our compliance to the regulations are based, because it's governmental, we have to use the census data. Am I right?
Yes.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are also mandated to use the census blocks, geography, as well as the PL 94-171 data, which is 100% count and which is published every 10 years.
Yeah. Thank you.
We could make slight adjustments where you feel that certain areas are going to increase in population, or there could be a zoning change. And that is something that, we could kind of think about and work on. But as far as data is concerned, it has to be the census data.
Right. The data is the data.
The other thing that I wanted to say, that the norm is 10%, which is quite a lot, to work with. So the goal is to keep that deviation as low as possible, but the 10% threshold gives you quite a leeway for local knowledge that you have, that there will be development, there will be growth. So we don't have to go down to like 0.91% or 5%, you know, we can work with 6, something which is under 10, and which says, you know, I mean, it looks, districts look pretty much equal in population, so.
I'd be interested in your perspective of the advantages and the disadvantages of the two options you gave us, so that we can consider our thoughts together as a group.
Sounds good.
See, the thing is, what we gave is based on data. So we looked at data, we looked at, oh, okay, there are 1,200 people, if we move them, what we are looking from you all is like local knowledge. So that's what we discussed earlier. So let's see which communities are the ones which, you know, can we move them or not? But once again, in this case, where the population has to move from one district to another district, we are kind of bound by the district boundaries. So we will have to move population along those district boundaries. And we are kind of, you know, that's the only way you can do it. We cannot move somebody from the middle of the district. So those are some of the limiting factors. But certainly, you know, we can, you know, we can evaluate, you can tell you, you know, I guess.
For sure. Like you saw, what we will like to do is give you detailed maps of option 1 and 2. And once again, they are for you to think and see if this is good. Because we know that District A has to lose. And we know that C would have to gain. And then the southern districts, you know, if any one of them gains, then we are able to bring down the maximum deviation. Sorry about that.
And the goal is to bring the maximum deviation down under 10%. Is that accurate?
Yes.
That is correct.
Got it. Thanks.
And that is just a measure of the difference between your most populated and least populated district. And we want to try to keep it low so that
Right.
our districts are equal.
Can you tell us what else these changes would impact that we may not be aware of? I'm thinking when I look at the crossover from A to C, does it impact anything else within the city? Like the portion of A that's shifting over from left to right coming in, a big chunk of that now is under the purview of the redevelopment agency. And a lot of that is linked to the census data in terms of there, and I may need a council person to answer this, but does any of that impact any other thing within the city? So that we can, I just want to make sure that we have all the information and what the possible implications are, you know, good, bad, or indifferent.
Sure. What we got from the city was the neighborhoods. So that is the layer. We do have the taxing districts layer we got from the city. And those are the only two things that we have. And then we have the street center lines that I showed you. We got them from the Bureau of Census. And so we try to use whatever information is available publicly, as well as what the city provided us. So I think the best thing would be for you to take a look at the options, and we can give you detailed PDF maps that you can zoom in. And we have a lot of background information there that you can see, because what you're seeing on the PowerPoint, you can't see much, right? So we can give you large detailed PDF maps for you to review and provide us feedback like this works, or this just will not work, that type of thing.
And when you get to the portions that engage the public, which I think you're going to talk about in the next steps, and I'm only bringing that up because I snooped around your New Haven work that you did there. I'm assuming this will be a little bit similar to that. Would there be anything interactive at that point in terms of, you know, kind of doing what if to, you know, shift things around without having to go back to you with your, you know, with your database to move things?
We haven't planned for interactive stuff for the community or for the RAC. But the RFP did call for it called for an email address that we could provide to the community, that they could provide feedback on what will work and what will not work. And what we have seen, what really works is detailed maps. And we could also provide you with the link that if you would like to get it put on our website, where interactively people can zoom in and see the proposed options. So we can do those kinds of things.
Just interrupting here because Tom raised his hand. Oh,
Also, one thing we can do
Sure.
is
Yeah, if I could, yeah, just want to comment on one thing. Diane, you mentioned, you're asking about the neighborhood, the East Norwalk Neighborhood Association and the borders. One thing that the city doesn't have a very good map of those neighborhood associations. So if you have one, if there's one around, I know, Diane, you've been involved in a lot of these things. You may have a better map than the city does, in which case it'd be great to share that.
Yeah, actually, the city has the actual maps. But they modified those maps for, I think it was during the, it had to be during the POCD, Tom, because they wanted to break it up into chunks that were more relevant for the POCD when they went out into the community. And some of the things that they were recommending that were in the draft POCD. But the actual maps, Steve Kleppen has the actual geographic boundaries of all the neighborhoods.
Yeah, we gave them those maps, but I thought when I looked at them quickly, some area, I mean, some of the associations were missing, I think. So maybe it's not complete, or maybe Steve has something else he didn't share with us. But I can check on that.
Yeah, we can do this offline if you want. I mean, there are neighborhood associations that still have boundaries that may not have been active though. And so it's probably worthwhile doing an exercise to see if they even really exist. And that may be factored in, but I think to a large extent too that I think I'm more concerned with other impacts than I am actually the physical neighborhood association. Because even where we have neighborhood associations, and I think Ken can speak to this as well, is that, as you come up against another neighborhood association that's abutting you, we're kind of all one happy family. We're facing the same type of, traffic issues or the whole, same ecosystem. So I'm a little bit less concerned about that, but I also don't want someone to, think, we've lined up with something that doesn't exist except in the mind of zoning. But yeah, we can take that offline and I can review that, and if that's helpful, just so before, especially before whatever the public sessions are.
One more thing I wanted to say, that some of your neighborhood associations are pretty large. So they're pretty large, and you cannot keep it all in one district, so they have to be split.
They may be spread already.
And some are already
already
split.
split.
Mhm.
So where are we on the agenda?
so at this point, I guess we can go into what the next steps are. Which I think that,
Darlene, will we be able to get the PowerPoint this evening, you think, or tomorrow morning? If you could just blast this out.
Hopefully
at
tomorrow
least?
morning. Yeah, as soon as we could, between Artbridge and Esther, I think we can get this out to you as soon as possible.
Thanks.
And I like the interactive idea, and I think that seems to be a very useful tool. I think people kind of like that as well. So if we can get that, that would be great. If we can't,
And we can also provide you with PDF maps, which detailed maps, and we have found that very useful, where people can just zoom in, zoom out with all the streets labeled. So that really works well, because everyone doesn't like to get into the interactive stuff. But the PDF maps are, anybody can open, you can open it on your phone.
Yeah.
So.
And we can put the boundaries, the neighborhood boundaries on it as well.
When you zoom in though, are you actually seeing the population for that street, or you're just seeing the street? When you say you can zoom in on the street, are you seeing the census population for that street? Even if you can't move things around interactively?
What we could do is, because it's not by street, it's by block, right? And the blocks are bounded by streets. So yeah, we could give you the population for each block, yeah.
Okay, so where are we? Esther?
Okay, so what would be available, I guess, for tomorrow morning would be the presentation and then maps. Presentation and then detailed maps. And then did we get a definitive answer on interactive maps?
Let us
Sounds
say
like something we'll work on, right?
Okay. Okay.
So with the detailed maps, I think it'll take a couple of days to get them to you. Maybe a
Okay.
day.
maybe tomorrow,
Maybe tomorrow?
afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, yeah.
Tomorrow.
Darlene,
Okay.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but is also a timeline on this? So we can see all the upcoming steps like our review, recommendations, public, whatever the public session or sessions would be, and then
Sam or Pretty, I think did we do something like that? I know we talked about it. We do have a very strict timeline, definitive.
Yeah, what we will do is, I think what we will do is add a slide in the presentation on for timeline, because timeline is pretty crucial because everything needs to be done by September 30th.
Right.
So that is crucial. So we can add a timeline slide on it.
okay,
And
can you just remind us again why anything would need to be done by September 30th? Because the munis are in 2025.
as per the RFP, we have a deadline to complete. Everything should be completely done by September 30th. So maybe Darlene or Esther can
I
talk about-
believe those were mandated guidelines. I mean, we'll have to look into that. But those were the guidelines that we were given for that date. It was a certain amount of time that this had to be done, but we can look into that further.
Yeah, because my understanding, and maybe Stuart and Tom can help out here, but my understanding was that there was just a deadline that would predate 2025 primaries or whatever the first thing up would be. Assuming there's no other ballot things, which never happened here, but that it would be a 2025, whatever the first ups are for anything to do with voting. So that's why I'm a little baffled. I'm not suggesting it should take longer or shorter. I'm just confused as to, was that an arbitrary date and
Nora?
Nora.
Yes, so the logic here is, I mean, you're correct, Ms. Cece, that yes, this is based on when the 2025 elections will occur. But remember that districts do nominations well before the primaries. So I believe district nominations begin being discussed probably around May. So, and Stuart and Mr. Smith will need to do some significant work to, as you already raised questions about, figure out if polling places need to change, notifying people of that. So there's a significant amount of work that needs to take place in order to be able to implement these. So that's the basis for the deadline. We really wanted to make sure that there was no time crunch creating significant errors or confusion around these very important elections.
But then that also kind of speaks to, if we need extra time, is, how much is that? A month maybe or so, but I think, as Ms. Nojelski-Eichner said, to be prepared for what's coming, but it is a quick process. We don't want to make you feel like you're going through it too quickly without enough time to really, digest it and come up with something that you really all believe in. So,
yeah, I think that's important, because the flip side of what Scott Goodwin was saying is the fact that if we don't get another bite of the apple, we're not going to go through this exercise again for sure, because it's all based on the census. And if this doesn't roll around again, then until 31 or 32 or 33, depending on when the 2030 census is. I'd rather spend a little bit more time and make sure we're getting this thing right than to have September 30th and then, have to live with something that maybe
But I
should
think
have
we
been
also
vetted a
have,
little
yeah,
bit more.
we have to refer to, Stuart Wells and his office as well. Like what are your needs? What does that look like? So,
Well, I've got nothing to do this year, just a presidential election.
oh, okay.
Oh, Brian Smith is retiring, by the way, so it'll be a new Republican registrar come January.
Well, okay.
Just so you know, and you're not assuming he'll be there, but
So
Yeah,
it's
and then,
about 10, I'm sorry, go ahead, Esther.
oh, I was gonna say, yeah, we're about a few minutes off from the finish. I would assume that there is probably some work that I'll have to do with Sam and Pretty to schedule the next meeting. And I'll look at the timeline that they provide. To try to get as many things in the calendar as soon as possible. Any other items that anybody has in mind?
Esther,
If we have
it-
questions offline, oh, I'm sorry, Ken, go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead. Mine is to Esther. If there's some way where we could say, oh, we're going to meet every 2 weeks, we're going to meet on a Tuesday evening or a Monday evening, so we can all plan and know when it is. If we're meeting every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, once a month, however it is, that would be great to be able to know to schedule it.
Rebook.
And then you wouldn't have to reach out to us and get all our schedules each time. That's just something to think about.
Right. I have to look at the timeline.
Sure.
And sort of see what other items might be on the city
Right.
calendars, just to make sure.
Yeah.
But yes, I'll be happy to try to make it as, consistent as possible.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
And then who would be the point of contact if we have questions that we just want to shoot in as we have them, but that gets shared with the group, the questions and the responses? Is that
That
you,
would be-
Esther, or is that Darlene or Nora, or
That would be me. I'll make sure to gather all that information.
we just voted for you? All in favor of Esther. Thank you.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, I think that leads us to the adjournment of the meeting. I don't think technically we need to do a motion, but would anybody like to make a motion?
Second.
Diane? Okay. And so is everybody how would
So of course I want to say something. I have to tell you, this was a very good and engaging first session. I think, Sam and Pretty can say that you all asked some really relevant questions, and I just appreciate this group, and I believe we're going to really make some meaningful changes. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene.
Okay.
Okay.
So votes for adjournment? Yay.
Everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good
That
night.
ends
Thank
tonight's
you.
meeting. Thank you.